Hello, this is Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical, and thanks for joining me on this Saturday special stream. Today, my guest is my colleague and comrade, Allan Max Axelrod, and his comrades from No Amarin Shutoffs in Illinois. Allan, please remind everyone who hasn't seen us on my old show what No Amarin Shutoffs is, and introduce your comrades, please.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm the campaign lead of No Amarin Shutoffs. It's a $0 all-volunteer grassroots campaign spanning the state of Illinois, north and south, east and west. We have won 4 utility shutoff moratoria statewide to protect our community from the pandemic. It's an ongoing fight, and it's terrible. With that, we have with us 2 liaisons, hopefully later a third from the coalition. We have Ben Theobald of the Champaign-Urbana DSA. Go ahead and say hi real quick, Ben.
Hello, everyone listening.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, hi.
And we also have Melinda Hilker of the Southern Illinois DSA.
Hello, everyone. Greetings.
Hello, Melinda. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Chris.
Nice to meet you, Chris. Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. I am really glad to try to get activist voices out there, especially when it's something important like this.
Yeah, and we're in an emergency situation, so I really appreciate you making the time to do a special episode of your podcast for us, because this past Thursday, geez, time flies, the state regulatory body for utilities called the Illinois Commerce Commission, without discussion, just decided to reopen the state, to resume utility shutoffs in April. And the reason that this is incredibly dangerous and damaging is because we've been here before in the state of Illinois. We had utility shutoffs start in September 24th, and our caseload skyrocketed more than 60% in every category: caseloads, ventilators, deaths, hospitalizations, ICUs, the whole spectrum. And our caseloads now are higher than they were before the last time utility shutoffs happened in Illinois. And also, we don't have herd immunity. We have barely 25% of our state vaccinated. So we basically brought liaisons from Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, and Southern Illinois here to basically highlight that we are spanning the state. Thank you for joining, Cameron. Could you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Perfect. My name's Cameron. I'm from Lakefront DSA. I'm the co-chair. We or one of the co-chairs. We actually just became an official chapter, so that's super fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, 3 of the DSA locals that actually disrupted Governor Pritzker's press conferences were organizing committees. One has since become a chapter, but we can do it from any stage of development. But we're also not entirely a DSA coalition. It just so happens that all the liaisons today are from the DSAs. That's because of the over 4 dozen organizations that are in the No Amarin Shutoffs campaign. We have the, as mentioned, Lakefront DSA involved, Peoria DSA, Western Illinois DSA, Logan County DSA, Sangamon County DSA, Christian County DSA, Central Illinois DSA, Champaign-Urbana DSA, Bloomington-Normal DSA, and Southern Illinois DSA. So it's a full quarter of the coalition. And we also have coalition members who are from the Communist Party USA, from the Party of Socialism and Liberation, from Socialist Alternative, from the Green Party, from Indivisible, and pretty much every organization you could think of, Malcolm X grassroots movement, and so on. And it's because lives are at stake. Ideological disagreements can wait.
No, and I agree. And And really, we're getting to the point where lives are going to be at stake and so many other issues. And the more we work together on this stuff, the better. We're going to need to all work together on the big stuff soon enough, I worry.
Yeah, and with that new strain of the coronavirus, that sooner is pretty much now anyway. I think, Ben, you had found a public health official outlining the situation. Do you have that available to pull up? It's okay if you don't immediately.
Yeah, I can get that up.
But I also want to state, at least because we've basically said things are bad, we have won 4 utility shutoff moratoria before. And it is entirely possible that we can win a 5th and protect Illinoisans. And this isn't just kicking the can down the road. We have legislation in the Illinois General Assembly with a whole slew of co-sponsors, including the House Speaker who replaced Michael Madigan, our recently deposed Speaker of the Illinois House. And yesterday we had gotten another Senate co-sponsor added to the bill. The bill in Illinois is called HB 2877, if I remember correctly, and it allows for direct payments of federal relief to ameliorate rent and utility debts. So what we need is to hold the line to stop utility shutoffs from resuming until those funds have been dispersed and until we have herd immunity. And it's not that far away. And it just goes to show how ruthlessly profit maximizing these corporations and our government are willing to be for their own comfort. And, you know, they're not struggling financially. The latest financial quarter made available from even the water utility is up 48% in terms of profits per share. So it's something that we can stop. And we'll get into that probably in a little bit. Ben, do you want to read out that tweet since you found it?
Sure, I can just do that. This is by a physician by Ashish Kejha. He is an MD and MPH. In this tweet, this is a tweet thread he started March 17th. So that would have been
Can you guys see
past
this
Wednesday?
okay?
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you able? Yeah, I posted in the comments.
Yes,
I think.
and I pulled it up. But can you guys
Okay.
see my screen okay, or is it just showing my StreamYard?
It is showing up okay to me.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. So all this tweet thread, it goes for about quite like 6 or 7 tweets, but the first tweet starts that he writes is over the past week, number of infections in the United States has stopped declining at about 50,000 infections every day. About where we were at height of the summer surge. Why the stall? Suspect B117, and that's the high.
That's the highly contagious one that was originally called the UK variant. Yes.
So suspect B117 is now starting to really have an effect, and states are opening up. This is a problem. Problem with national data is that it misses underlying state trends. A month ago, every state saw declining cases. Today, 15 states have more cases than 2 weeks ago. 19 states have a higher test positivity than 2 weeks ago, and even hospitalizations are inching up in some places. This is not a surprise. B117 probably represents about 40% of infections in the United States today. Means about 20,000 infections identified today were likely from B117. It will become the dominant variant in the next couple of weeks. So what's the problem? And he says, look at Europe. As it becomes dominant, you tend to see large spikes in cases hospitalizations, and deaths. And so he asks, so are we in big trouble? Well, and he says, not necessarily. There are two ways out. Keep vaccinating and fast. Well, that's one. Two, keep restrictions in place for a few more weeks. We're doing the first, not the second. And then he says every high-risk person should be able to get a vaccine by mid to late April. And that's kind of reasons that's so close. Every infection that kills someone today is a person who would get vaccinated in a few weeks. So we have to keep public health restrictions in place for a tiny bit longer. Then he says that means not relaxing indoor mask mandates, not returning to full restaurants and bars, and not cutting back on testing. And it definitely adds an urgency to vaccinate every high-risk person, older folks, those with chronic diseases, as quickly as possible, like now. And so his last tweet is the last tweet. Bottom line, we're still at a high level of infection. We have stopped declining, and I'm sure we'll see cases rise. Let's finish vaccinating high-risk folks, then smartly relax public health measures that will allow us to enjoy what will hopefully be a great summer. I mean,
yeah, thank you for finding that. Thank you for reading it out, Ben. Thank you for showing that, Chris, because it's just like no public health expert has disagreed with the things that we're advocating for. The only two people who have two kinds of professionals that have disagreed with us are corporatists and politicians.
And who doesn't want to disagree with them?
Well, I mean, if they donate,
like that, unfortunately.
Well, this time we fortunately bypassed that. Last time we had this same bill introduced in the Illinois General Assembly, and it was killed by one state senator named Laura M. Murphy, who had received very suspiciously timed donations from Ameren, Illinois, and other corporate utilities.
Yeah,
right in the thick of the fight.
No coincidence there.
Yeah, none at all. And I think that she still is in proximity to the regulatory body, which is a problem. And so this time, yeah, it's really, Illinois is ranked often as one of the more corrupt states, and the hubris of the politicians in the ways that they will just deprioritize human rights just goes to show how little they fear organized accountability. That has everything to do with elite capture.
If everything turns out just right, and we all catch the right breaks, maybe this will guarantee that J.B. Pritzker, like other governors before him, is availed of the chance to take part of the state of Illinois' special retirement program for politicians.
And the thing is, like, I want that to be true in terms of, like, he literally can issue an executive order to save lives, and he is choosing not to, which is an active issue. Governor Rauner very much deserves the same thing. Former Governor Rauner of the state of Illinois. He's the entire reason we didn't have a year-round homeless shelter in Champaign-Urbana until the pandemic unleashed additional funds, because it was in the interest of in the immediate interest of public health. And, you know, like, they just normalize this kind of stuff to where it's not something that people are held accountable for. And honestly, like, I look at the stuff that's going on with Chris Cuomo, and, you know, there's a there for more than just him. So are we going to see that actually happen in our state, where a governor has been openly fact-checked about his powers and just kept on going without saving lives? Why is it worse to actually lie and send people back to nursing homes, and not worse for killing tens of thousands not tens of thousands, sorry, that's the number of people shut off, but killing thousands of Illinoisans by just refusing to use a power that he has and financially benefiting from it, arguably, because of the fact that he owns Berkshire Hathaway stocks, which ships a lot of the coal and also is involved in direct ownership of one of the utility corporations.
Berkshire Hathaway, that's Warren Buffett's corporate gem, isn't it?
Yeah. And 24% of Governor Pritzker's wealth is arguably tied to Berkshire Hathaway. The reason I use arguably is that 24% number comes from the average transaction size of the $13 billion, I think it was, that was transacted over a period of 8 or 9 years from Berkshire Hathaway to 11 Pritzker cousins, including Governor J.B. Pritzker. And this company owns not only the power utility interests, but also owns water and nuclear power utility interests. And Warren Buffett has been quoted as saying, utility stocks won't get you rich, but they'll help you stay real rich. That's a paraphrase of his quote. And, like whether it's water filtration for the nuclear power plant or just service providers for Aqua Illinois, 2 out of the 3 business partners are Berkshire Hathaway subsidiaries, EcoWater and Ecodyne. So, there is not necessarily is Governor Pritzker profiting from this, but what relationships is he prioritizing? Because it's clearly not the relationship with Illinoisans.
Well, and it would be it might not be easy to prove that he was immediately profiting from it. It sounds like it's a reasonably safe guess that what's good for Berkshire Hathaway is good for at least 24 to 25% of J.B. Pritzker.
I mean, even then, even if it's not a substantial amount of the financial portfolio, the fact that one is likely to be beholden to somebody from whom they've gotten 24% of their wealth.
Yes.
Right? Because the thing is, it's not the donation that necessarily determines the degree to which you are culpable or in their pocket. Senator Laura Ann Murphy only got about $1,000 or $500 per payment from the utility corporations.
Yeah, it's true.
It was more so about maintaining the relationship. And so when we are having a pandemic with clear, well-documented safety requirements, not just from public officials on Twitter, but also public health officials on Twitter, but also the Congressional Research Service's 2007 Bush-era report on pandemic safety called Pandemic Influenza: An Analysis of State Preparedness and Response Plans. It had in Table 8 the continuity of essential services, including public utilities, as one of the things that they were specifically checking states for. And only 7 states at that time had any plans whatsoever to ensure the continuity of utility services. And, the frustrating thing is, again, this can be resolved by an executive order. But 2 things have happened. One is that the governor was issuing executive orders for a blanket protection of evictions and then weakened those protections. He only weakened those protections after we won the extended utility shutoffs moratorium that stopped power shutoffs from happening in this state. The reason that's of note is because, as The Intercept reported, utility shutoffs are a way of dehousing people without evictions.
Way of performing an eviction but still getting around an eviction ban, basically.
So when that didn't work, they then made the eviction protections in Illinois closer and closer to the federal standard, which is means tested and has resulted in a lot of people being evicted and dying. And so the pattern seems to be that they are beholden to maybe a particular lobby that was a top donor on a package that they sent out to all the presidential delegates for the 2020 election cycle. Let me go get that.
Very possible. I know Berkshire Hathaway has a lot of real estate interests just from association.
Yeah, and we're still trying to map out that interest because that is something very tangible. There's multiple manufactured housing related businesses that are owned outright by Berkshire Hathaway. And that's going to take a lot of time that, due to the urgency of this issue, we may not have.
Yeah.
But this is a box that was sent to us by the Illinois Democratic Party for all the delegates. And at the very top is People's Gas, an Illinois utility. Then, you know, there's a union and there's a bunch of other corporations, but oh, look at that. Illinois Realtors. So this is our state Democratic Party, whose mascot is the only person who's changed when our state House Speaker was deposed. But everybody else that is approving these decisions is still in a position of power in our state. And so that's what we're up against, but it is solvable. We have, in addition to legislation, started to show up to do specific calls to action to apply pressure. The first and second moratorium that we have won, we won by simply blowing up the Illinois Commerce Commission's phone line. And so if any viewers are watching this during business hours, I highly recommend calling 1-800-524-0795. Again, that number is 1-800-524-0795, and leave an informal complaint saying that they have no business shutting off utilities. Last time we had done an action like this, the Democratic Party chair for the capital of Illinois had actually complained or remarked that the Illinois Commerce Commission was complaining about how often they had to answer the phones. So it works. We had won literally 2 moratoria on it, arguably a third, but that one wasn't officially declared. And that's just something small that anybody inside or outside the state can do to help.
And you know, there's nothing more satisfying than crashing the phone lines of people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's definitely something I encourage people to help out with if they're able.
And the other thing that we are doing is it turns out that we get daily briefings on where the governor is going to be. And yesterday, we actually had 2 activists show up to his press conference. The idea of an escalation strategy is you go from 0 to 60. So yesterday was about a 5. We started to circulate the graphic to tell people to call the Illinois Commerce Commission, and we had friendly faces show up to the governor's press conference. But if this issue is not resolved, there will have to be escalation. And I'm specifically saying nonviolent because, of course, there's going to be people looking to say that it's otherwise.
Well, and I will raise the fact here. I don't think we've mentioned it. Some people may not know. J.B. Pritzker's a billionaire, isn't he?
He dethroned Trump as the wealthiest politician in the U.S. when he was elected.
That sounds about right. I knew that he was pretty rich. I know the Pritzker family has money out their ears.
And here's the other. Sorry, the thing that's abundantly frustrating is that what the governor's doing is endangering all of Illinois, not just during the pandemic, but in terms of what our government is going to look like after this. Because the more that he allows this kind of stuff to happen, the more likely we are going to see a Republican governor like we had right before him. Like, this is real and within our living and recent memory.
Yeah.
And that's when we had a bunch of austerity and social services failing, and where we were missing payments on the debt in Illinois. And this is something that we are going to have to confront, whatever situation that is, because I will fight for making sure that we do not have a Republican governor again in this state, but I will be very loud when it comes to the gubernatorial primary, because we cannot risk someone who has had such a trash fire response to the pandemic, not relative to Republicans, relative to Democrats. New York, as bad as their scandal is with the nursing homes, actually kept protections in place when it comes to the moratorium on utility shutoffs. They didn't start shutoffs in their state. They suspended them.
Yeah.
California did that too. And it was all over the place. We were one of the first states to let our utility shutoffs moratorium expire, in the first 7 at least.
I remember when we were talking about this in the first go around, Kentucky had protections before you guys did.
They even renewed their protections before we did and made them mandatory by executive order. In fact, Kentucky, I think, was one of the states cited when the governor was fact-checked by local media. And he's just pretending that this doesn't exist, that he doesn't have this power, and people are going to die.
So let me point out, and this is why I asked about Pritzker being a billionaire. Just by knowing that he's a billionaire, we know for a fact that he did profit, because we know that all the billionaires in the country have gotten richer off of COVID, while the rest of us have gotten poorer or died. So we don't necessarily know the specific means by which he profited, but we know he did.
Yeah, and when the next net worth publication from Forbes, for example, comes out, that's something that I'm going to be looking at very carefully. And, you know, like the corporation that Pritzker's family sold, Marmon Utilities, is going to be profiting still from the pandemic. But as far as culpability due to systemic things go, that's something that is being nitpicked by the right as well. So we have to be very careful in how we delimit that. We're not saying that because they are in the health care aspect, or because they are working on sanitizing ventilators, that Governor Pritzker is doing this. I think that it's literally because of maintaining relationships that he deems more important than the lives of the most vulnerable Illinoisans that he's doing this. Yes, he's making a buck, but when you're that rich, it really doesn't matter all that much.
Well, at the same time, when you're that rich, you want to be richer. You can't help it.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely that aspect as well. But when I'm talking about, you know,
I know.
Yeah, like 24% of your net worth comes from one billionaire, arguably, who has a son who's going to be running for for sheriff in Macon County, whose mayor was in the running for state senator when there was an appointment to fill. And so it just is very frustrating to see that plan out, even when it's across ideological lines. And this isn't something like I'm saying very clearly, hey, look, they're coordinating. I'm not. I'm saying that whether it's the Buffett relationship, whether it's the relationship with other legislators, whether it's the relationship with other billionaires, with other millionaires, it's inexcusable. They should not be prioritized more than our residents.
And really, as governor, his first responsibility should be to keep the people in his state alive.
Yeah, and he's making a very strong showing of it to folks who don't know about the utility shutoffs issue, and to folks who aren't thinking about, oh, well, the eviction moratorium's been extended. What's so bad about that? It's means tested. The people who don't understand that part are the people who are confused why anybody's angry at Pritzker. And it's 100% designed that way, because one of the things that comes from information theory is this idea of cross entropy. It is to say, if you can implant a false idea, how much additional communication do you need to overcome it and to get the actual message across? And that seems to be more of what they're interested in doing, is riding out the clock by creating as good a showing as possible while still having this horrendous thing queued up to potentially happen.
So, in other words, they're deliberately practicing opacity instead of transparency.
Yeah.
That's not good.
It's
Well, and you
not-
look at what the statistics are when it comes to the low income help that there is available in Illinois. I actually submitted for it. I have not heard back. That was in July. Okay.
Long
And I
time.
have not worked all year long. I am a teacher's assistant and I couldn't go back. Our income dropped almost $25,000. We have not heard back once. Luckily, we have means. We are privileged and we had a savings. But if it hadn't been for that, I've been in those places before. If you don't have a transport to get to the place, if you don't have every single bit of that documentation that they will require from you, and they want to know your income, and they want everything for the last 30 days, and they want driver's license, and they want birth certificates for the whole family, you're marginalizing the people in those places, because in Illinois, you can be evicted from housing if you don't maintain those utilities. You can, within 7 days, you're gone. And it is part of the contracts that you sign. Not only that, but seriously, it's like this complete disconnect. It's like, oh, we're going to keep throwing all of this information about the low income housing help and the energy help, and the access for it is ridiculous. The access to get it, you have libraries that are no longer open to people. Where are people going to get access? You have seniors who don't know how to do half this stuff. You give them a telephone number and call, and you might hear from someone after sitting and calling for hours and hours on end. And it's happened. And you have people who are in panic mode because, we're getting stimulus money's going out, but there's still that marginalized part of Illinois and across this country that just do not have any protections. And they're at the end of their ropes. We've been in a year of a pandemic and people are exhausted. People are dying. We're at this point now. It's either now we do something, and that clock ticking in a lot of households right now. And they know they have, once as of April 1st, they have no protections and they have 2 weeks to try to pull together whatever they can. Oh, and they say, call the utilities and try to make agreements. If you have nothing, what are you going to give to them? What kind of agreement can you make how can you guarantee any kind of payments in that kind of situation? How can you make an agreement like, okay, well, I hope that there might be a stimulus money that shows up at this date and date per the IRS, but then, it's absolutely insane. They keep doing this circle of deflection. And we're going to deflect it to this group. Oh, we're going to deflect it to this group. And let's not even talk about the fact that Southern Illinois specifically is extraordinarily rural. We have one place for like 4 different counties to seek help. And that's if they're there. Because a lot of these places that do offer help, they haven't had staff. They haven't been able to open up. So I can remember in July calling all these different places. One place answered. And you know what they told me to do? Oh, go back to the Illinois website, because that's what Pritzker told us to do. And that's where we're at.
Well, when you say that, it makes a heck of a lot more sense why 70,000 less people actually made it successfully onto the low-income home energy assistance program this year as compared to last year. Also, the agreements that you're talking about, the agreement that you can make with the utility corporation is called the deferred payment agreement. And it requires you to put a percentage down, which is like 10 to 25%, depending on your income. And for some people who owe $7,000 was what I was told by one reporter, that's not money you have. And only if you pay your utility bills thereafter in full and whatever payment amount they decide you're going to pay, you pay that amount in full. Otherwise, you're shut off again. And on top of that, the only people who get this $0 down deferred payment agreement that they started to advertise are the people who made every payment to their utility bill and all the payments of the previous deferred payment agreement that they have made. That is to say, the people who have been doing well enough are the only people that they are helping right now. And everybody else is given weaker protections than we had in the start and in the end of September, at a time when we have a higher caseload than that same thing. Like, this is kerosene.
The classic American government practice of giving the most help to the people who least need it.
Yep.
Yeah. And I will note, he said last year. Now, last year we were still running a presidential election and Trump was still president. So for folks who have been telling you in mainstream media that Biden has fixed everything, no, Biden has not done anything to fix any of the problems that ordinary people were experiencing under Trump. And in fact, the election of Biden has made a lot of Democrats think they don't have to worry about it the way they did when Trump was around. And so things are happening slower instead of faster.
And the frustrating thing about that is that even critique of Biden's presidency is being subjugated, as you've no doubt seen on Twitter. But as far as the American Rescue Plan goes, it hasn't done anything that I've seen for the utility shutoffs issue, which is not just an issue in Illinois. It's an ongoing issue in many other states that have suspended utility shutoffs or have just allowed them to happen, and people still owe a lot of money.
And that's a real weakness. The other real weakness is, to the best of my knowledge, while it has extended the federal eviction moratorium, it has done nothing to patch up all the loopholes that still have people getting evicted because they fall into the exceptions at the federal level.
Without a lot of grassroots organizing to develop the political education and awareness of these gaps, most people are going to say, oh, well, that shouldn't be too hard. Or, oh, that's great. Problem is solved. People don't actually understand how oppressive means testing is. In Illinois, in the last 5 to 10 years, the highest percentage of eligible households that have received LIHEAP, again, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, was about a third. Mm-hmm. We save a lot of money by means testing, but we also hurt a lot of people by means testing.
And if I may butt in here, the thing about LIHEAP, I said this at the ICC meeting this past Thursday, they don't provide assistance year-round. I believe they only start like around October. Like, I know they begin around October, and they don't provide assistance, from what I understand, with things like water, and which during a pandemic, if your water gets shut off, that's a real big issue, as it was with this young single mother who I spoke to for my radio show. I do a radio show here in Champaign, and she fell behind on her bills because she had to cut back on her hours because of the pandemic. And so it became obviously a very dire situation when because I believe her water got shut off. They sent her a letter December 18th. And also her car got repossessed, so she didn't have a car. So getting access to her mail was a bit difficult, I believe. And then so eventually she had to move out of her house because the thing, as you know, if your water gets shut off, a lot of times, and if you live in public housing, they'll just evict you, or they'll just well, and not to mention, if you're a mother and you have kids, you can't live in a place that doesn't have water. That how do you? So she had to move in with another woman who was very generous enough. But what's even more unfortunately, make another situation. The woman that she moved with got COVID, so it's just a very dire situation, and just very frustrating, as you can imagine. With LIHEAP, you have to give them all this information, and I believe you have to give you your driver, if you have a driver's license, social security number. And I think she was actually told to call the Salvation Army, which offers up to about $200 now for a bill that. Also, another thing, her bank, unfortunately, her bank account went negative, and when your bank account gets because you're not able, you're taking a lot of money out, or you're spending more than what you're getting, and that was in her case because her hours were getting cut back because of the pandemic. So she wasn't able to receive her. I don't know if will be able to receive this current stimulus check. Was it the $1,400? But she didn't even get the last one, the $600 one, because her bank just said, no, your account is negative, so we're not gonna, even though this stimulus check is supposed to help you, we're not even gonna let you get access to it.
That doesn't make sense, though, because that would help them too, because that would pay the negative balance.
Yeah. I don't know the way. Yeah, or banks were, some banks.
It might have been a fact that there was fees above the 1,400, so the fees just consumed it all. And I've been there, done that in my 20s, and watched that thing go woo like that. It doesn't take much.
And to answer this question, Kennedy, you take the $200 and you add it to whatever the $1,400 check that the government promised us ends up being. I'm sorry, whatever the $2,000 check that the government promised us ends up being.
Well, I actually wanted to go to a comment that Chicago Kennedy had said earlier, which is, this is how they take kids.
Yes,
you are 100% right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was a big concern
from the Women's Center here in Carbondale that covers 9 counties. That's exactly what the legal advocates are explaining to parents, that yes, absolutely, you can lose custody of your children if you do not maintain utilities for more than a 2-week period, I believe it is. And really, there is one women's shelter in all of Deep South Illinois. There is only 2 other homeless shelters from 200-mile radius, I believe is what it is. That's how rural we are.
That's pretty rural.
There's no infrastructure. There's very little infrastructure when it comes to access to even get anywhere. There is one bus that might take you from one side of the Illinois to the other, and you better schedule it a week ahead. Yeah. And so to get these protections in an emergency situation like this, it's gonna be unavailable to most of our downstate area, honestly.
Yeah. I lived in the Tennessee-Virginia border for a while.
You get it.
And the town I lived in, Blunteville, Tennessee, was essentially, a few downtown city blocks and a whole bunch of houses and farms around a few downtown city blocks. And that was it. That was what it was. There were some built up spots here and there, but not much. And I know that there's not much difference between that part of Tennessee and Southern Illinois as far as the landscape and the towns.
We're basically northern Kentucky, yeah. I mean, it really is that same kind of culture, though. It's that rural culture. It's that southern kind of culture. We see a lot of Dixie flags out around here. We also see a lot of Pritzker sucks. And I go to my parents' house an hour and a half away, and every other house, Pritzker sucks, Pritzker sucks, Pritzker sucks. So it is a threat that if we get another Republican in here, we're screwed. And it's that simple. There was a school with a county just north of me during Rauner's reign when he decided to not give any of the schools anything for about 3 years. They bounced the checks of their entire staff for 2 solid weeks because they had that little funds available. That's a public school. That's the kind of thing we're having. I have lost, I don't know how many doctors in Illinois because they will not pay. They just decided just to stop paying any of these doctors. So we have this fleet of doctors that are just leaving and fleeing because as soon as the insurance actually lessened in Illinois for anyone who was in healthcare, guess what happened? Rauner screwed us all. And we are literally a resource desert from really Champaign all the way down.
Yeah, and not just Southern Illinois, like Champaign included, because we lost our nursing home. We had a publicly funded nursing home. It may be one of the longest running, or it was, and it got privatized because of all that. So, yeah. Sorry, Chris, you were going to say?
I was just going to say that, I mean, this is, imagine for the people who are looking outside at all this, it's just, imagine that you had just gone through something like Flint, and then you get a Democratic governor who makes it worse, and who's so bad that then you get another Republican on top of all that. I mean, this is why people are so angry. This is why I can't believe that the folks at the federal level haven't been able to get it in gear, even though I know all the reasons they haven't, and none of them surprise me. I still just can't believe that our government can have this level of inability to function in a crisis. And it's because it's literally been stripped away that much. They've literally stripped our ability to respond to crises right out of the government. They talked about making it just small enough to drown in a bathtub. Well, congratulations. These are the consequences of trying to drown the government in a bathtub.
Well, and making you pay more for that smaller government in a sense. There's actually a really enlightening public comment from rural activist. He's the liaison and co-chair or chair of the Christian County branch of Central Illinois DSA. His name's Kenny Crow. Is all right if I put up that video?
Of course.
All right. Let's see. Kenny. There we are. All right. It should be up. Are you able to share that?
Yes.
My time starts.
Here we go.
Time has started.
I would like to ask the government of Illinois to please stop waging wars on the poor people of Illinois. There are people all over the state that have lost jobs or had hours cut due to a pandemic that is no fault of their own. And we have people in Illinois that work jobs all the time and pay their way, but they're unable to do so lately because of statewide shutdowns and stay-at-home orders that are no fault of their own, and they've unwillingly fallen behind on payments. And I want you to think of the people who are scared and worried about utility shutoffs on the horizon while they try to get back to work as safely as they can, hopeful that they can keep utilities paid so that they can stay clean for work, have heat at night, care for their kids and their families, and they're going through all these emotions while all these things are happening around them that's out of their control. The stress and the mental strain on them is something that a lot of people, perhaps such as yourselves, do not quite understand. Now, I live in Pana. We've had about 50 shutoffs here and about 180 to 190 in Christian County. 20% of Pana's people here live below the poverty line since the last census. Places like this get overlooked by big cities often, but we're essential too. Our economy has fallen away from us, which causes low income in these areas. People here work and pay taxes, and they expect to get something for it. Now, we get nothing compared to what we're paying taxes for. The greed of the government, the overtaxation, the lack of social resources, and large companies being treated as more important than the people has got to stop. So I do ask the people such as yourselves in Illinois to stop raging wars on poor people and punishing people for something that is not their fault. I ask for serious action to be taken for the safety of Illinois' people and their basic utility needs, because the government of Illinois is not doing that. And I'm speaking for the Christian County DSA. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And it just goes to show that when you have one side arguing, yes, we need to fund this program, yes, we need to fund that program, and the other one's telling you we need a smaller government. Oh, it looks like to be playing again.
I would like to ask the government.
Thank you. Basically, when you have one side of the political mainstream saying we need to build out these programs, and you have the other side of the political mainstream going, we're paying a ton and we need a smaller government because it's just a waste of money. You then have the socialists somehow finding themselves in between those two spectrums, saying we need these programs and we need them to be cost effective and sensible. And it's like this in downstate Illinois. There are socialists who are arguing for lower taxes because it's literally depopulating us, not just from the idea of like people moving out of the community, but when they can't use the market to displace you, they use their taxes next. Decatur, Illinois is a prime example of that, where housing is really cheap to buy there, but your taxes are the thing that displace you. And so, yeah, like we are at risk of becoming not a red state, because we will maintain a blue legislature, but a red executive branch like we were not too long ago. And that is the thing that, in addition to the pandemic safety issue, that's the thing that Governor Pritzker is recklessly doing, because he's relying on this notion of hostage crisis, right? Like if he dominates the Democratic primary because he's able to say, look at how great I am, I passed this, that, this other thing, and I did all these protective policies despite the fact that they were unpopular. If that's the narrative he's able to drive home instead of being held accountable, it's going to be the tens of thousands of people that he shut off. It's going to be the Republicans that are beyond frustrated with the government costing so much and for things they don't care about. And it's going to be a lot of socialists who are looking at this going, my God, this is a terrible situation. How are we going to get people to turn out for this? Because we need to avoid the Republican. And it's one of these things where it seems like we're being dared to basically point this out, because then they get to try to blame us for Pritzker's political damage. The fair tax initiative in Illinois was an initiative that was to move from a flat tax to a progressive tax. It was Pritzker's initiative. And its absolute failure at the polls, not at all helped by utility shutoffs, by the way, if you count all the households that were disconnected and the fact that some of those households moved into other households, that made up the difference. So it's arguable that it was a huge factor. It's not 100%, but that was seen somewhat as a referendum on the leadership of our state. And Pritzker, in his self-interest to try and win re-election, rather than addressing the serious issues that cause distrust in our state, although this was one of them, to be honest, called it quits with removing our state house chair or state house speaker. And, you know, that is the right call to make, but to pretend that that's it, to pretend that there aren't substantial issues in our state that can be addressed differently or sincerely for a change, is to condemn us to this crisis. So we have to fight against the pandemic now, but we also have to acknowledge who is going to be causing those electoral pressures, because it's not us.
That's true. And the people that JB Pritzker is bearing his throat for are just going to be worse than him.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If he was really a good guy, you know, one of the things that he would take on is the fact that We have high dollar hedge funds price gouging our pensions. That's something that's shared between Illinois and Kentucky, not just the Southern culture in downstate, but literally that price gouging mechanism. And to my knowledge, that hasn't been fixed. And that's something that needs to be fixed. But maybe a wealthy person isn't going to endanger those relationships.
That's a really good rule, Kennedy.
Yeah.
I'm entirely favor of not trusting people who have their names on buildings. If Herbert Hoover was alive, I would definitely tell people not to trust him. Same for J. Edgar.
Well, Kennedy, coming from someone with the last name of Axelrod, I completely identify with what you're saying. I've had to clarify so many times I'm not related to the guy. I even published my family tree online. But yeah, Kenny's statement that was made to the Illinois Commerce Commission right before they ignored him and said no. We had folks who were former state representative candidates that are liaisons of No Aim Shut Off Speak. We've had 2 of those, including a former municipal candidate as well. And it's like one of the most striking was Diana Burdett's speech that she gave. I was wondering if we could play that too, because she just plainly talks about the situation.
Certainly.
There you go.
Okay.
Lakefront Democratic Socialists of America, out of Lake County. The community I specifically live in is a component of the working core of our county. We are the housekeepers, the gardeners, the grocery gas attendants, dry clean shopkeepers of the ultra affluent in our community. Warehouse workers with little to no regulations, packaging safety materials for hospital industry. In essence, we are the essential workers that were in harm's way when the pandemic struck. We were the ones that were not able to shelter in place and were the hardest hit with deaths and disease. On October 29th, Governor Pritzker tweeted that by October 1st, cases increased by 151%. Increases in 73% hospitalizations, 61% ICU patients, 63% patients of ventilators, and 82% in COVID deaths. Those statistics were gathered from communities like mine, essential worker communities. And at the same time as COVID destroyed our communities, so did power shutoff. With over 2,000 cases a day, 2 weeks after shutoff started, over 3,000 cases a day, 3 weeks after cases started, and over 4,000 cases a day a month after cases started. It's been clear that though essential communities that provided bodies to maintain the working cog of daily life were exalted in memes and on paper, in real life, our people are expendable. As our communities hit the peak of winter, our power was shut off and our people are the first and last to suffer. Well, platitudes are not enough. And now we are asking for more. We are asking for action. It is not, the cold is not over. Our children are still at home trying to learn, and we are still essential. We need to extend the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we had just so many speakers. Like, I don't know if we could go through all the videos this evening. Like, you know, I'm totally willing to, but it's going to be a lot of people talking about how this is needless. It doesn't need to happen. It's going to cost lives. From the Party for Socialism and Liberation had a speaker. The Communist Party USA had a speaker. And, you know, obviously Diana Burdett is in Lakefront DSA with Cameron. And, you know, just everybody was there and they just ignored us all.
I'm just so livid just even listening to a couple of those speeches so far, because it just confirms my view of how worthless the people in politics are now. And I mean, the best people in politics don't seem to be very good right now. And the worst people in politics are just monsters. And Go ahead, Alan.
And it's for a lot of that reason that it perpetuates their power. If they're able to be traumatizing, gaslighting, and just generally hostile to the marginalized working class, they are able to keep a stable voter base in a hostage-like situation to where they get job security. And
that's what they want. That's what they have been trying to engineer for a long time. I don't know who remembers it. In early 2009, one of the so-called pundits said, "Oh, we could have a Democratic majority. For 20 years, the Republicans have been beaten so badly in the last election." And it was that mentality that they would hold on to this because all they had to do was show a little bit of results, and no one would ever vote for Republicans again because they had done so badly. And then they failed to show meaningful results for the people who most needed them.
And also, we got to remember how much the U.S. has continued to destabilize other countries. And when those comm strategies were brought home, what happened?
Yes. Because they're doing exactly to us what they do to the population of Libya or Venezuela in a lot of ways. We're being attacked with the same psychological weapons that Radio Free Europe used behind the Iron Curtain.
Well, and the way that we combat that is by becoming not only it's not only in the broadcast spaces because there's so much self-selection there, but it's also by becoming a reliable source of information for our local community. One of the things that we're doing in the Champaign-Urbana DSA pending a vote is distributing information on our local domestic violence shelter. And just by repeatedly going through the community with that kind of information, whether it is this is the bizarre and insanely dangerous thing that's happening in our state government or in our city level, the antics that they're up to that just would blow your minds that we need to help, like saying it's wrong. That's the kind of stuff that will change.
I'm sitting here outside Portland, Oregon. The stories I could tell you about tear gas Ted Wheeler. The man is disgusting. The man essentially engineered his own reelection with an illegal campaign donation from himself. I mean, I can't put it into words. The man is terrible. Oh yes, okay. She wants to know about the donation to himself.
Yeah, I've not heard about this at all.
So Ted Wheeler occupies two positions at the same time. He's the mayor of Portland, and he is the commissioner of the Portland Police Bureau. Now, that's a huge conflict of interest and a whole lot of power for one person. But more important, it also gives him control of certain, the sort of political funds that all executive offices in urban government appear to have. So he actually donated to himself as mayor from himself as commissioner of the police, using the political funds for that office to donate to his own campaign.
Are you sure he's not from Illinois?
I don't know. I do know that he supported Mike Bloomberg in the presidential primaries, if that doesn't explain everything.
Explains everything to me.
He's a Mike Bloomberg Democrat. In fact, a lot of these mayors that we have all around the country are Mike Bloomberg Democrats. The guy in Minneapolis is one of these Bloomberg Democrats. Keisha Lance Bottoms down in Atlanta. Muriel Bowser in D.C. Plenty of mayors all over the country are these Mike Bloomberg style dictators who have this cozy relationship with the police department and the Chamber of Commerce and no time for the ordinary people of their community.
I'd hazard a guess and say any non-grassroots mayor is going to be endorsed by the realtor lobby and the police union in their community. So that doesn't strike me at all as surprising.
And yes, Kennedy, Lori Lightfoot is exactly one of the people I'm thinking of. In fact, you know, if I had to compare Lori Lightfoot to any one mayor, I would say that Lori Lightfoot really reminds me of Rahm Emanuel, and that's depressing because she promised change from that.
Yeah. And how, again, like the people who wanted differently than Lori Lightfoot, when she promises change and then doesn't deliver in a cynical way, how many people who voted for her at the first time aren't going to vote again?
It's true. And you think about that. I mean, that's the real damage that Obama did. Obama guaranteed that we were going to get somebody like Trump for president because he guaranteed that a whole lot of people who were really, really convinced to vote for Obama because of the things he promised were not there in 2016 at all. And it wasn't because of Russians.
Well, and there's a point behind the fact that we keep identifying with this identity politics, and then we're shunned and hated, and heaven forbid we speak out against the black candidate or the gay candidate instead of like looking at the candidates for who they are. This identity is ridiculous.
But, you know, and that's the thing, though. There are plenty of black and gay socialists running for office around this country.
Mm-hmm.
There is a queer socialist black woman running against Steny Hoyer in Maryland as we speak. Now, why are the Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris Democrats not there in Baltimore campaigning for Michaela Wilkes against the old white man?
Why indeed? Why is a progressive party that seems to be clinging to this identity politics, why are they the only ones that are speaking to the masses right now? They're identifying with the masses, so we need to start looking at what are we kind of doing wrong? Do we need to start reaching out? Like this coalition itself. We came together from all over the state, from all different walks, from all different perspectives. And we came in because this is what we need to do, and this is the right thing to do. It had nothing to do about politics. It's about humans, and it's about human lives, and it's that simple. And it should be that simple.
And sadly, though, because of the way the system now works, anything that you have to do to try to help other humans has to be political now, because they've made it a political reality that we can't help each other.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. There is a way to disrupt their dynamic, and it again goes down to the local, not even local lit dropping, but local solidarity. And actually, one of the things that will get Republicans rooting for you, and not rooting from you in a yes and then you take them down and we'll win, but like rooting for you because some people identify as Republicans despite all the hateful ideology, because that's their trauma response to the gaslighting and dishonest behavior of the Democrats who espouse certain values. My dad, for example, is somebody who will say, I had an uncle who once watched professional wrestling going, at least you know what you're getting. And now I agree with that. That's something my dad had said. And, you know, at the time I wrote it off as an anecdote, but like, I ended up phone banking a Trump voter for a municipal candidate not too long ago. And after a 3-hour conversation, the person was asking me about marital advice and wanted to actually have another call again. Mm-hmm. And so and it's not because they were like, yeah, socialism's great. They liked what was being said and how, when it comes to the fact that I wasn't a party shill. And he assumed that I was. And when I actually was honest about the shortcomings of politicians, he then was like, oh, wow, you're a human being. How did you end up over there?
No, and that's really what makes the difference sometimes is each side dehumanizes the other so much. You hear Democrats talking about, and we've done it a little bit ourselves on this show, but that's because a Republican governor really is a bad thing for a lot of states. But it's true that Democratic governors are doing awful. Pritzker, Cuomo, Newsom has done some awful stuff. My governor here in Oregon has been very fortunate in the fact that we have some of the lowest numbers in the country, but our low numbers are not due to anything great she's been doing. Our numbers are good because of the eccentricity of the state. We are the only state in the country where it is illegal to pump your own gas. And because it's illegal to pump your own gas here, you don't have 15 people touching the same gas pump in the course of an hour and a half. And because of that, I believe that's one of the reasons that it hasn't spread here the way it did in Washington and California. Because that one means of transfer, which is happening everywhere else, just isn't here. But that said, it's not anything that Kate Brown has done. She opened up restaurants at a bad time. She waited for too long for the original shutdown. She looked bad closing everything down again like a week after she had opened it up because it never should have been opened up in the first place. They want to open stuff up again. They've got some restaurants that are open to some capacity again. It's just...
And here's the thing, is that the political pressures and the lack of systemic courage of these individual governors who had to make a lot of compromises on values to get there in the first place could be avoided if there was, say, a president who was going to take a bold stand in their first 100 days of office.
Exactly.
Irrespective of a check, even if they were just willing to be the political punching bag to get that safety.
If their CDC was willing to take the blame for schools not reopening instead of getting on the ball of pushing everything to open as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm losing trust in those Twitter CDC announcements because, again, our COVID caseload in Illinois is higher than it was last summer, is higher than it was before utility shutoffs began.
Well,
that's not a safe reopening.
Well, let's talk about the CDC for a moment, because the mainstream media just a couple of days ago was talking about how great it was that we could trust what the CDC was saying again. So I don't know how well people actually pay attention to studies that they don't see on the news or hear about on a show like this or see on Twitter. So most people probably don't know that the reason outdoor dining was shut down in so many restaurants in so many states is because there are studies that show that COVID-19 is transmissible from up to 20 feet away. So when you know that COVID is potentially transmissible from up to 20 feet away, according to the studies that told people to shut down restaurants, and you say 6 feet in the first place, and then you say, oh, well, kids will be safe at 3 feet. How can we trust the CDC?
And this is something that, like, the very first time that I spoke to any public body, by the way, like all the way back in 2017, I was a reformist at the time. And I basically just said to them, if our public institutions aren't trustworthy, that's going to lead to a very dangerous road. And, you know, because like, what are the Republican average voter or mainstream voters going to say when they look at this? They're going to say it was all a charade. And since the president changed, you know, it's never been a big deal, ya baby. And the reality is that it's always been dangerous, but maybe the corporations were a little more friendlier to the idea of a Democratic president and were more willing to bite the bullet when it comes to the costs of the pandemic. And now they've got somebody that they like, and they're going to work with them because it's safer for their brand, not their profits, but their brand.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, it's actually safe. I mean, when it comes to trusting the CDC, it is. It's one of those things for me. I actually read that study, by the way, Chris. The 20 feet. It was from South Korea. It was a really good study, and it's stuff like that. And I think we do have to recognize the CDC is a political organization, like it or not. And yes, we do need to push. Most of the public does kind of need to just listen to the CDC because, let's be honest, they don't have the capabilities to really digest that kind of research. Because we have an education gap. We have a very big education gap, and that information is not going to be easily digested by a lot of different people because they're not going to understand what is being said to them, how it's being explained to them.
I'm a white guy with a high school diploma. I'm not exactly a rocket scientist.
But frequently, education is incompatible with the degrees. I know people with PhDs who are dumbasses.
Well, that's not always a question of education.
I concur.
You can't educate somebody to be smarter than they actually are.
No, but you can educate because we have a gap when it comes to education. I'm actually a teacher by trade, and I'm actually finishing my degree in special education. Yeah. We have taken and stomped out creative thinking out of people so badly
and critical
that whatever we put in front of them, they believe it. Because I literally had an argument with my brother who is only a high school graduate. He did do some college classes, but he was military. And he's arguing with me about, oh, you can't listen to the colleges and but yet he still has a whole bookshelf full of textbooks that he goes for his resources. But he had such a disconnect of the disconnect of the mentality of, I'm like, do you realize that the people that teach the colleges write those books, bud? Because we have this gap that has been sowed by a lot of media sources. And for mainstream people, I honestly will. I'm like, I will keep telling them, please listen to whatever the CDC says, because they do make it digestible. They make it I can make it very easy and very simple for people who do not have the understanding, and they don't really want to have the understanding. They just, because they've never been taught to think for themselves. They've been taught listen and follow. And that's it. And we're going to have that until we have educational change in this country in general.
We have to try more. We have to find ways to educate each other too, because we can't rely on the corporations that are deliberately making the education system dumb us down to make it any better anytime soon.
And white supremacists, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's too much interest in the schools not functioning properly, just like the government not being able to help people.
So here's an uncomfortable thing that I've kind of realized, at least in Central Illinois. When it comes to non-electoral lit drops, who does it more? The left or the right?
The right.
We always see the reports of the white supremacists taking a road trip through and leaving hateful literature that then gets them news coverage where the news is going, look at how outrageous this is. But what they're really doing is join this group.
Mm-hmm.
And
pretty much
because they are, able to do that kind of thing, they are the ones who are reaching out to folks who are disaffected, marginalized, and white, that then end up joining their echo chamber. And what we need to do because again, online spaces are algorithmically segmented, and what we need to do is we actually need to do a lot of lit drops. And I'm not talking about that in terms of the no hammer shutoffs. Like that one, we have the politicians and we need to make them feel pain in order for them to start to uphold the protections that we need to keep people safe. But regarding long-term organizing on issues and potentially electoral by building up class solidarity to understand a lot of the tactics that are used against us, we need to actually do that. We need to have people go, okay, I may watch OAN, which is terrible, but this group of loons seems to have the right idea. Like if we get that far with somebody, that's amazing, because what they're doing is they're doing the same thing that over decades radicalized them to the right to get them to actually understand the systems that they are operating in, so that they aren't duped by a corporation into blaming somebody incorrectly.
The whole radical socialist labor movement that made FDR do what it wanted him to do for a brief period of time from 1930. Oh, let me think, do some math in my head here. From 1936 to about 1940, he pretty much had to do what they said. That was built by lit drops and organizing in the workplace and people talking to the person sitting next to them on the bus or the train. That was something that happened because people very aggressively worked to build it. And it was not part of the Democratic Party. It didn't just commit itself to electing the local Democratic candidate to office. And now a lot of those systems have been co-opted into the establishment of the Democratic Party, and we have to build them again for ourselves and reorganize that system from the ground up again.
And it's that's exactly what we're working on doing. We had our working meeting with the actually being able to build that vision.
Okay, I think Allan had a short issue there for a moment. Hopefully we will get him back in a moment or two.
That's another symptom of rural Illinois life.
Yeah.
Internet access, it's come and go, and it's usually dictated by the weather.
Yeah, I believe it.
Storm. There you go. Actually, my parents live in a black zone. Like there is no cell service, there is no phone service outside of landlines that they had to pay a whole lot of money for. So
yeah,
rural life.
So you were saying before you broke up, Allan.
Basically, we're gearing up to build up a database where we can do regular lit drops to inform, agitate, and organize our community members so that we can reach out to the most disaffected and work our way through the working class.
There was some really great communist pamphleteering in the 1930s. And if we could just do that again on a large scale, that would be great.
Well, and people also forget the way that newspapers got entrenched was some schmuck was pushing a newspaper in your face in the city street. Exactly. Now, during the pandemic, I don't recommend that. But unlike the socialist organizations that sell newspapers on the street, if we get to that point, it's part of our canvas where we actually like talk to people, give them the information with the call to action in there. Because the thing is, I got our libertarian asshat of a city council person to basically treat people with some modicum of respect just by holding a clipboard and walking around bus stops. They really know where their bread is buttered, and they also know what can take that away. And the moment that you show up in a small town and start to organize people, you may just get a very suspicious job offer from a state representative and have to decline. So,
well, that's just like, that reminds me, and I want to say this to everybody out there, especially if you're running for Congress in 2022. When somebody offers you a guaranteed city council seat or county supervisor seat to not run for Congress, say no.
Yep. And that's actually something that a lot of municipal candidates did in Champaign-Urbana, and it generated a lot of interesting data to show that the local party didn't turn out the vote at all and got steamrolled by the old guard in our community. And we were a third group in that mix, and we actually improved all of our metrics. And that's where we made certain decisions of what we were not going to do. So that doesn't bode well, because ostensibly the group that was talking big and gaslighting everybody, they were saying that they were going to get record turnout. And then they started blaming the voters for not showing up. Our county clerk in particular did a live stream about it. And so in Champaign County, just briefly, our Democratic Party has two factions that are infighting. And as far as the DSA is concerned, or at least I am concerned, I'm willing to just let them fight while we just organize in solidarity with the working class. And, that is to say, they can take pot shots at each other. They can align with each other when it suits their interests. We aren't interested in sharing power with either of those two groups. We can't abandon our values to try and take on oppression, because we become internally oppressive, which is what they are. And the old guard, which never had those interests, just continues, harming Black and brown members of our community and promoting the police who perpetrated that harm, which is something that happened just last month.
There was that. There is a reassuring sign from Nevada that if you manage to beat them bad enough, they'll all quit anyway.
Yeah. That was amazing.
That is something that happened. That happened at a time when I was this close to joining the people who said they were never going to support any Democrat again. And so that was fortuitous. I'm still not any fan of the party, but I'm motivated to help people within the party take on the leadership again.
Well, I'm a huge subscriber of the basic idea of the dirty break. I'm not exactly like a point by point agreement there, but the basic tenet is take power where you can inside the party to further human rights.
Yeah.
But don't get attached to those positions.
Definitely.
Because we still have to build power outside of it if we are going to actually enfranchise, empower, and embolden the working class to make the demands. We're not a vanguard.
And that's the whole thing, is that we need pressure groups outside the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party did not wage the civil rights movement. That was something that was waged by people who organized on their own from the grassroots and put pressure on politicians of both parties. It does not matter that some of those people are Democratic politicians now. Don't listen to the sort of whitewashed history that says, oh yeah, white liberals love the civil rights movement and we're happy to vote for all their ideas. No, it's not true.
And here's a pretty bitter pill for me, at least, is that we saw last year the largest protest movement in our lifetime and probably in this country's history. And what were the gains nationwide for it? And I think that has to do with the fact that there's been so much erosion of the foundational organizing, and the idea that protesting alone is sufficient. First off, I will never talk down about a strategy, but I will acknowledge the bounds. That is to say that I'm totally in favor of protests. You tell me that there's a protest, I have the availability to go, I'm going in solidarity. And I've been at some really small protests, some really small anti-war protests. And the thing is, you need to actually have an effort to form a lot of long-term, solidarity-driven, formative relationships with community members and with other organizations that hold the same principles, not other organizations that are to the right of you. And that is how you are going to get those wins. And I think that despite the increase in the amount of consumption of leftist literature, there's the organizing aspect that remains to be built out more.
No, and the organizing and education are what we need to be focused on more than anything else, in my opinion, because that's going to be the backbone of everything else. And people really need to understand what's being done to them and how to fight back.
Well, and that's actually precisely the reason why at the next Champaign-Urbana DSA meeting, we're actually using our poly-ed section to talk about domestic violence. Because when we're looking at the structures that uphold oppression, it's made up of a bunch of different organized people who use abusive tactics.
Yes, it's true. And a whole lot of the strategy by a lot of the people in the Democratic Party really, really, really fits the patterns of abusive partners.
Yeah.
100% agreed.
I think we're getting to a good point to wrap. I think we've had a great discussion. Cameron, was there anything you wanted to add before we wrapped up?
No, not anything specific. Diana put all of our feelings from up north pretty succinctly in her talk.
Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure. I want to thank all of you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I was glad to have you. If there are more developments, Allan, do not be afraid to let me know. I am happy to do special shows in order to get stuff out there. I'm also always happy to add you to the regular show schedule as well. So you know how to get a hold of me if there's anything we need to let people know about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. And hopefully the next time we reach out, it's for good news.
I'm here for either, and I'm always happy to help put pressure on. And since between the three of you, you cover the whole state, I will go ahead and just say I try to do what I can to help people who are running against particularly noxious or even just not particularly useful incumbents. If someone wants to run against J.B. Pritzker, please don't be afraid to tell them how to find me on Twitter at Eclectic Radical.
Oh, absolutely. We can't risk that guy being the reason that we then get a Republican in the office. But that whole figuring out how that will work comes after getting protections because we need to save lives first.
I agree. I just think there needs to be some payback for Pritzker while we're at it.
Absolutely. And we're keeping the receipts. Like Allan, you always say, we're keeping the receipts.
Yeah.
And we're taking a knowledge of what we're doing right now. Just even if he changes anything, we still have this here. We still have this now. And you've done a good job of keeping the receipts.
Yep.
Thank you, Melinda. And one of the things, just to clarify, I'm going to talk about a little bit of cynicism for a moment. If I didn't think that Pritzker was in danger of not winning his reelection, is that a thing that I'd at all be talking about?
That's true.
Because the thing is, if he was just going to win reelection, we educate people on what his gaps are. And since we are going to at least get some concessions in the meantime, we can focus on other fronts of the fight. And the reality is, given the failure of his fair tax proposal, given the fact that he is continuing to basically pass the buck down to other units of governments that are then not doing their not enacting their powers to help, and he's still not using an executive order, anybody who cares about human rights will have a rightful pause on what's going to happen. And I hope that that doesn't result in a Republican in our governmental office. That needs to be avoided at all costs. If Pritzker wins the primary, I'm going to be very nervous, but I'm going to vote for him. And I'm going to be very nervous, and I'm going to try to turn out the vote, because we cannot have another naked austerity, I should say, willing to shut down the government, essentially, Republican governor. We just can't.
No, that never goes well for anyone. It's true. I want to thank you all again. Once again, to my fans at home, thanks for joining us. I'm really glad that we could put this on for you. I'm glad that you could watch it short notice. Remember, my channel on YouTube is Eclectic Radical. This is going right there as soon as it finishes uploading. And keep watching. I'm going to have more stuff from No Emmer and Shutoffs, plus everywhere else I can where there's activism happening. And for those who are planning to watch the regular stream on Monday, I will have Kennedy Cooper back, and we will be talking to Jessica Mason from the Texas 30, who actually called for a proletarian revolution on Twitter. I love it. And with those thoughts, folks, keep educating your neighbors. If you have a chance, talk to your Lyft driver about communism. You might be surprised how it goes. Have a great night, folks.